Okay, we're live here with Andy Carter, Warrington South MP. Andy, thanks for taking the time to catch up with Warrington Worldwide. Very difficult time for Warrington and the whole country, the whole world at the moment, going through the coronavirus pandemic. And after midnight tonight, Warrington's in a local lockdown. It's going to have a major impact on people's lives. And there's a lot of confusion out there, and we're having this meeting now because you've received lots of questions from worried constituents about how it's going to impact on their lives, how it's going to impact on work, how it's going to impact on the town. We've just seen the latest statement from the health advisors about how the pandemic is back, and if we don't act responsibly very quickly, we're going to be back where we were in March and April.
Yeah, and I think that's absolutely what they're trying to avoid. It's interesting watching the medical advisors with their guidance on how it might develop over the next couple of months, and the exponential growth that they're seeing in France and Spain and Belgium in particularly, and they're concerned that might happen here as well. And I think that's why some of the measures have been introduced from tomorrow, and that's why I suspect over the coming weeks we'll see some more measures introduced, not just here but elsewhere, to try and make sure that the virus doesn't get out of control. I mean, the British people in Warrington over the last 6 months have done a fantastic job of following the rules and trying to keep the virus under control. But we can see it spiking back again, and there are all kinds of reasons why it's spiking back again. But we've got to make sure we take the right steps so that it doesn't become out of control.
Why does everyone seem so ill-prepared for this situation? Because when it started, when the virus hit way back in March now and April, we were told this second spike was coming. And yet it seems to be a surprise and a shock to many people. Why is that? Because, I knew it was coming. 3 or 4 weeks ago, I started putting the stories out. I was accused of scaremongering. People were having a go at me, saying I was almost making it up. But we knew it was coming, so why do we seem so ill-prepared for it?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've had some correspondence this morning, people telling me that this new virus this virus now has mutated and is not as strong as it once was. Well, there's no evidence to show that at all. And I think, you're absolutely right. We knew that it was going to come back. We've now got to make sure we take the steps and prepare so that it doesn't get out of control. Where you have a virus where there is no way of controlling, we don't have a vaccine at the moment, then it's going to be around for a period of time, probably the next 6 months. And we've got to accept that we've got to live with some controls and some restrictions so that it doesn't get out of control.
But it is very frustrating for people when we hear statements from the Prime Minister himself way back in June that we're going to have world-beating track and trace, and now people in Warrington still can't get tested. And then we've got the panic situation where everybody wants to get tested all of a sudden, whether they've got symptoms or not. You must understand why people get frustrated and angry.
I get frustrated and angry. It's not just constituents. I live here. I've gone through it in my family. My wife was hospitalised, so I've seen exactly how impactful this virus can be. There's a couple of things I would say about testing. I have the figures for the last few days in Warrington of how many people have been tested. And it's about 4,500 people were tested. So saying that people can't get it, that nobody can get a test, actually that's not the case. 4,500 people in Warrington were tested, and about 211 people were positive. So there's a tremendous amount of people that are being tested that it's coming back negative. And the question that we have to ask, and this is something that I said last week as well, is only get a test if you have the symptoms. Now, I'll tell you why I'm saying that. Last week I heard from some people that wanted to go on their holidays, and they'd been told by the airline that if they wanted to fly to the country in particular, they needed to upload a test certificate 72 hours before they fly. They were trying to get a test. Well, that's not a reason for using the Public Health Service test facilities. And it's the same actually if you don't have the symptoms. You don't need to go and get a test to check to see if you have it. Only use the test system if you have it. 4,500 people used it in the last few days, 200 positive, a lot of people that weren't positive. Now, I understand it's worrying, particularly where people are asked to go home from school because somebody's got a cough and a cold, but the only people that really need to get the tests is the person that's ill in the first place. And then, if they're positive, we can take steps to make sure that the other people isolate as well.
Right, well, we're being inundated with questions on screen, can't keep up with them all. We've got some that people have sent in already, and one of the big issues that you're hearing from your constituents is from worried parents and people going into work about whether other people can look after the children, grandparents and things like that.
Yeah.
What's the situation as we go into local lockdown in Warrington?
Yeah, I mean, this is something I've raised with health ministers across the weekend, and they're continuing to look at. But the advice, as it sits at the moment, is that if you have friends or family that regularly look after your children, then they should stop doing that from tomorrow. Now, I realise that sounds like a very difficult thing for people to do, but that's advice that's being given by the government. Think very carefully before you ask elderly parents to look after your children. And it's being done to try and stop the spread of the virus, not to cause you inconvenience.
And I mean, I've heard from people, you know, when they're coming back from holidays and they've got to quarantine and dogs to walk and things like that. Again, they can't allow other people to walk the dogs, can they?
No, absolutely. You know, well, you can ask other people to walk your dogs. You shouldn't go out and walk your dogs yourself. If you're quarantining because you're back from abroad, or if you're in a situation where you've had to isolate, you shouldn't go out. You should stay in. Now, you can ask other people to walk dogs for you, but you should take steps to make sure that you're not using the same lead.
I was going to say, how do you hand the dog over without coming into contact?
You've got to ask people to, you know, have a separate lead and think it through. And again, I know it's difficult, and we're trying to reduce the spread of the virus, but we're asking people to take steps to make sure they don't pass it on perhaps to a loved one who might be more vulnerable, that they simply don't know they're vulnerable and might end up in hospital with it.
Now, support bubbles and households and things like that, where one adult joins another. What's the latest situation on that?
Okay, so support bubbles continue to exist. A support bubble, you have to choose who your support bubble is. So if you're a single parent family and you want to link in with somebody else as a support bubble, and it might be that it's your mum or your dad, you know, granny or granddad, you can do that, that's fine, but you've then got to stay linked in with that support bubble. You can't suddenly decide, well, it's going to be auntie this week who's going to be the support bubble. That support bubble has got to maintain. And you can continue to stay overnight in those support bubbles. You can go into other people's homes if you're in the support bubbles. If you're not, then the guidance now from tomorrow is don't go into other people's homes and don't go into their back gardens. And a lot of people have said, well, why is that? And the simple answer is, if you're in a social setting, and we know that's where the majority of the transfer of the virus is taking place, you behave in a very different way to if you're in a formal setting. So, for example, it's more likely that children in social settings or families in social settings will break the 2-metre rule. And they will forget about washing their hands, and that's where the evidence has been seen that transfer of the virus is taking place.
But there's a lot of confusion out there still about when people go out and they visit pubs and restaurants. I'm hearing people now still saying, oh, I'll be able to meet my friends from other households, even though I can't go round to the house, I can't see them in the garden, I'll still be able to meet them in the pub or a local restaurant for a meal. From tomorrow they can't, can they?
Well, the first thing to remember is, yes, you can still see people, but you can't socialise with them in the same way. You can't sit at the same table. So, you know, if you're walking down the street and you see somebody, yeah, of course you're able to see them. The clear thing that starts to change from tomorrow is that hospitality and a number of other sectors are asked to close from 10 o'clock at night until 5 o'clock in the morning. And then guidance that's been published is for people not to socialise with people that you don't live with. So if here in Warrington, if you are going out to a restaurant, you can only sit with people that you actually live with. You can't go and mix with other people unless they're in a support bubble. And again, that's down to trying to reduce the spread between households.
But what would stop me ringing someone and saying, I'm going to this restaurant with my support bubble at 7 o'clock in the evening, you can book a table adjoining in another part of the restaurant and we can still see each other?
There's nothing to stop you doing that, and that's fine. But you know, the other thing you've got to remember as well is the basic guidance of social distancing. Staying 2 metres apart from people, making sure that you wash your hands whenever you get the opportunity, and when you're in an enclosed space, when you're not eating and not drinking, put a mask on, because those three things are really, really important as well. You know, I mean, we are going to interact with other people. There's lots of other people that you're going to see on a regular basis. The steps that are being put in place are designed to try and break the chain of this virus spreading in an exponential fashion that will cause all kinds of problems down the line.
I mean, previously with the last outbreak, Warrington did really well and kept the infection rates low and the death rate low, lowest death rate in the northwest.
Yeah.
Why has things turned so quickly for Warrington? Because, you know, only a few weeks ago I'd almost stopped reporting on the daily increases because there was hardly anyone becoming infected. Why has it suddenly happened in Warrington?
It's not just happened in Warrington, it's happened all across the northwest actually. And if you look at sort of the northwest as a whole and Midlands, they're the areas at the moment that are most affected. The honest answer is I don't know why at the moment the northwest and Warrington and Merseyside are particularly more affected than elsewhere. It could be that certain areas of the country have got slightly higher levels of immunity. I mean, at the moment, the medical scientists are suggesting that there's probably around 8% immunity in the UK, but in some cities, perhaps in London, it might be as high as 17%, which could explain why London is a little bit behind what's happening elsewhere. The truth is, the virus is going to be out there, and by the fact that actually we had very low infections last time, it might mean that this time we end in the second spike with slightly higher infections.
Yes, and as we've just heard on the national news, this is going to be around and a tough time for the whole winter period now, another 6 months, and we're really reliant on the vaccine situation coming along, aren't we?
Yeah, I mean, respiratory viruses thrive in winter settings, and you know we're heading into the wrong time of the year for this type of virus, and I think that's why it's so important now that we try and get on top of the measures that are being introduced, so that people can really make every effort to stay safe.
We'll go through some of the other questions you've received from constituents now. Can I watch my son swimming in a race at the weekend?
Well, again, guidance is that if you're watching amateur sport, don't do it from tomorrow. If you have to do it, you know, if you're there as a carer and you need to stay there, then to wear a mask, in particular if you're inside. Don't gather in more than a group of 6 and stay 2 metres apart from other people. It's following those basic rules again. There is guidance around amateur sport in particular. I've asked for some guidance actually around things like Warrington Town. My understanding is that because the restrictions come in from tomorrow, from Tuesday, that the guidance actually is to say no, don't go and watch amateur sport and lower level professional sport in restricted areas.
I mean, apparently there's 5 teams from the northwest, including Warrington Town, travelling up to the northeast for a football game tomorrow night.
Yeah, and there's guidance that is going to come in and look at that.
Yeah, and how does it affect Warrington Town in the FA Cup, where they've already sold tickets for a forthcoming game?
Again, looking at that, because these steps have only just been introduced, and there is certainly guidance there, particularly related to sporting fixtures. We're waiting to see what that guidance says.
Okay, another question that's coming: can I share a car to work?
The answer is yes, you can, but if you're going to share a car with the same person on a regular basis. Don't hop around cars. So if you've got a car share routine set up, that's fine. There are also steps that you can take though when you're in the car. I'm asking the driver to wear a mask, or for both of you to wear a mask if you're in a car on a regular basis. Also making sure that you wash your hands, and wherever possible, try and stay as far apart as possible. Don't talk to each other. If you're going to talk to each other, it sounds silly, but face straight on. Don't talk to each other. It's a good idea if you're driving to face straight on anyway.
One of the big issues, a hidden issue which is rearing its head now, is the issue of mental health, which can tragically lead on to people taking their own lives. Do you think enough's being done by the government to tackle this growing problem of mental health? Because a lot of people are suffering at the moment.
Yeah, we do need to do more. I think actually Warrington have been tremendously successful with some of the programmes that have been introduced here. Not just statutory programmes introduced by voluntary organisations as well. And I've seen, and certainly through the early lockdown, there were some really, really good programmes that were introduced locally. I want to make sure people know how to get help if they need it. We've got a lot of information on my website, and I know you've got information on Warrington Worldwide of the people that you can turn to if you need support.
Yeah. And then going to the business community now, this is going to have a big impact on the business community. A lot of confusion out there. Furloughs going to end of October. without an extension of it, and we now know this is going to continue through the winter, are you going to sort of lobby the government and put pressure on them to help small businesses get through this and look at continuing some kind of furlough scheme?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing is the measures that they're introducing from tomorrow, from Tuesday, are to try and allow the economy to keep going. So we're asking people to take sensible steps to try and reduce the spread of the virus. I know the government doesn't want to have a national lockdown. I know I've heard from the Prime Minister directly that he does not want to have a national lockdown like we've had previously, because that stops the economy and causes all the issues that you've raised. So we've got to take steps to do our best now to try and protect both the economy and the health service so that we can operate going forward. I think what's needed is targeted intervention. So where we've got sectors where there's problems, where people can't work, where businesses can't open, for example, then those specific sectors need assistance. They should get that. And I know the government are looking at doing that. They've already announced that for some people that are on low incomes, in particular where they're having to isolate, there's money available for those people as well. And also steps to make sure that businesses don't require people to come in, that where they are isolating, that they can stay at home and they will still be paid.
We've talked about the economy and the impact on it. I mean, uncertainty has a massive impact on the economy, and there is so much uncertainty out there because there's still so many unknowns.
Yeah, there is, and this is not just a problem here; it's a problem in every country around the world. And I think when you start to stand back and look at how the UK has handled the problems that we've seen, then actually what the government have done has been unprecedented compared to pretty much every other country in the world. I'm talking to a couple of businesses in Warrington, actually, 2 bars that also got bars in Spain, and here they got £25,000 from the government. The Spanish government gave them €500, and I think when you start to look at put it into perspective of what the government have done, they've actually done a huge amount for businesses in this country. But we need to make sure that where there are sectors that are going to be impacted, those sectors are continued to get the help that they need. And I also recognise there are certain groups of workers who are very concerned and perhaps have fallen through the cracks, and I'm raising those with the Chancellor. I spoke in the House of Commons on Thursday, particularly about the excluded group that haven't had any support. Now, in particular, freelancers and directors of small companies that have fallen through the cracks, and I do think the government need to look at that.
Oh, well, as a director of a small company, I look forward to some progress on that one.
The one thing I think we should perhaps just finish with, Gary, is I spoke to Professor Constable, the chief exec of the hospital, on Friday, and I wanted to understand what was happening in the hospital and are we seeing the increases? And about a week ago we had 5 inpatients related to COVID. A week later there were 17. And there's a concern that a week down the line it'll be 35, and that those continue to double. And that's why there are steps being taken to try and reduce the spread of this virus. We don't know who will be affected the most. We know that if you've got certain conditions you are more vulnerable, but it can affect anybody. And that's why I think we've got to be very aware that this is a deadly virus. It has awful consequences. And I've seen and I've written to many people in Warrington who've lost loved ones over the last few months. I really don't want to have to continue to do that. I didn't get into politics to do things like this. We need to make sure we all take steps to try and not just reduce it for ourselves, but for our families and our loved ones. And that's why the government are introducing the steps that they are at the moment.
Before we go, there's hundreds of questions cropping up, which I can forward to you and hopefully get answers to. The new testing facility, which we've been told is coming to Warrington, is there any update on that?
It is coming. I can't give you an update today because I haven't spoken to anybody about it today. I know when I spoke to them on Friday it was scheduled to arrive this week. I'm still waiting for details of exactly where it will be and how people can access it. But I know that both the council and ministers in Department of Health are working on it at the moment.
Okay, well Andy, thanks for your time. I know you've got to catch a train to London. Perhaps if we could catch up again in a couple of weeks and go through some of the issues which people are raising while we're actually talking now.
Happy to do that.
Okay, thanks for your time.
Thanks.